Picture the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. January 14th, 2026, Nvidia, the world's most valuable company, just saw $200 billion in market value vanish in 90 minutes. That is the equivalent of the entire GDP of Greece, erased between breakfast and lunch. Why? Because of a single leaked memo from the Department of Commerce. It wasn't just another restriction, it was a total blockade. The memo read, "No more AI chips to China. Not the slow ones, not the legacy ones, nothing." Washington thought they were pulling the plug on China's future. They believed that by cutting off the brain of the dragon would stop flying. But as the sun set over Silicon Valley that evening, the CEOs of Intel, Apple, and AMD weren't celebrating a national security win. They were panicking because they knew something the politicians didn't. They knew that in the world of high technology, you cannot build a wall high enough to keep your enemy out without accidentally locking yourself in a room with no air. Most people saw the headlines and moved on. Another day in the trade war. But I want you to stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through is the boomerang effect. This is a story about the secret architecture of the 21st century, about dependencies so deep they are molecular, and consequences that are about to hit your wallet, your phone, and the global balance of power in ways you never saw coming. Let's start with the math that Washington ignores, the 50% rule. For the last decade, China hasn't just been a competitor. It has been the primary financier of American innovation. In 2024, China accounted for roughly half of all global semiconductor sales. Think about that. Every time a Chinese company buys a chip, that money flows back to California. It goes into R&D labs. It pays for the next generation of engineers. For Nvidia, nearly a third of their data center revenue came from behind the Great Firewall. When the US government says, stop selling to China, they aren't just hurting Beijing. They are effectively cutting the research budgets of American companies by 30 to 40%. It's like telling an Olympic sprinter they are forbidden from competing against their rival. But to compensate, you're going to cut off one of their feet. The irony is almost absurd. The US wants to win the AI race, but by blocking sales, they are starving the very American companies that are supposed to win that race. Without Chinese revenue, Intel's massive new factories in Ohio, the ones promised to save American manufacturing, suddenly don't have enough customers to stay profitable. We are watching a self-inflicted starvation disguised as a security policy. But wait, it gets worse, because China didn't just sit there and take it. Let's talk about something most Americans have never heard of, but absolutely cannot live without: the gallium trap. To build a high-end chip, you need more than just a blueprint. You need the earth. The US identifies 50 minerals as critical to national security. China dominates the supply chain for almost all of them. Take gallium and germanium. China produces 98% of the world's gallium. You need this for 5G base stations. You need it for the radar systems in the F-35 fighter jet. You need it for the eyes of autonomous vehicles. In April 2025, China launched its countermove. They didn't ban iPhones. They simply restricted the export of these minerals. Within weeks, the price of gallium in the West spiked by 365%. Imagine you are Tesla. You've spent billions building a supply chain for electric vehicles. Suddenly, the raw material for your power inverters isn't just expensive. It's gone. You can't just mine it somewhere else. Building a new refinery takes 10 years and billions in capital. Washington thought they were playing a game of chess where they could take China's queen. They didn't realize China owns the board, the table, and the room the game is being played in. There's a phrase used by supply chain experts: you can't unscramble an egg. The tech industry isn't a series of independent countries trading with each other. It is a single molecular organism. A single AI chip might be designed in California, but it's etched by a Dutch machine using German lenses, using Japanese chemicals, and then, critically, it is packaged in China. Packaging sounds boring, right? Like putting a box in a box? It's not. Advanced packaging is the process of connecting thousands of microscopic wires to a silicon slab. China owns 38% of the world's market share in this final critical step. When the US blocks tech, it creates a massive traffic jam. If a chip can't go to China for packaging, it can't be finished. If it can't be finished, it can't be sold. We saw this in mid-2025. Apple had thousands of finished wafers stuck in a limbo because the specialized facilities in Malaysia and Vietnam were overwhelmed and couldn't replace the Chinese capacity. The result? Your next phone wasn't just delayed, it was 300 more expensive because of the logistics tax. We didn't build independence, we built inefficiency. Here's the part that genuinely terrifies Silicon Valley. By blocking China, we gave them the one thing they lacked: a reason to innovate. For years, Chinese tech giants like Huawei and Baidu were happy to buy American. It was easier, it was cheaper. But the moment the US became an unreliable partner, China flipped the switch to total self-reliance. They began pouring $150 billion into a technology called RISC-V. It's an open-source chip architecture that the US can't legally block. While we were focused on stopping them from getting 3-nanometer chips, Chinese engineers figured out how to use 7-nanometer chips in clusters that performed better than our high-end hardware. They didn't just copy us, they bypassed us. In a leaked internal memo from a major US cloud provider, an engineer admitted, "The Chinese models are now running on 40% less power than ours because they had to learn how to be efficient with less tech. We didn't kill their AI, we just forced them to become more dangerous." Reality doesn't care about talking points. Washington claims these blocks make America safer. But look at the evidence. Gas prices for the digital age, the cost of computing are rising. The Pentagon is struggling to find the minerals for its missiles, and Silicon Valley is losing the revenue it needs to fund the future. The irony is complete. By declaring we don't need China's tech ecosystem, we have signaled to the rest of the world that American agreements can be torn up on a whim. So here is where we are: a tech war that has no winners, a supply chain that is being hacked apart with a hatchet instead of a scalpel, and a world where efficiency is being replaced by security, which usually just means higher prices. If this continues, the 21st century won't be won by the person with the best tech. It will be won by the person who can still afford to build it. And right now, by blocking the world's largest market, America is making its own future more expensive, more fragile, and more uncertain. Something has to give. Either the rhetoric cools down, or the very machinery of the modern world starts to grind to a halt. Watch the price of your next car. Watch the speed of your next internet connection, because that is where the real war is being fought. And right now, everyone is losing. Thanks for watching.